Let's get started. Hello everyone, and welcome to Understandable English, or if you are Russian, then добро пожаловать на мой канал. Today I'm going to continue this travel series that I've started. It's a series where I try to have more informal talks with you guys and tell about my travels around the world, and so that you can learn about the world and also about English at the same time. I've made some other episodes about Chechnya, about Armenia, and about some other places in Russia like Kamchatka or Novy Urengoy. So if you're interested, you can check those videos out too. Today, we're going to talk about an island that is in the sea, Sakhalin. Now, I'm in Yakutia and I want to go to Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk, the city in Sakhalin. And there's this interesting thing about Russia where just about everything is Moscow-centered. And so a lot of travel infrastructure is also Moscow-centered. But I'll show you a picture on a map because I am here. I want to go here. And what is the best way to do that? Well, maybe I could do a layover here or change my plane here. But no, it's very difficult to do that and very expensive. So the way that we do it is fly 8 hours from here to Moscow, then 9 hours to Sakhalin. So it's an exhausting long flight. And there's even this joke that one of the people in Yakutsk told me, and that is that one day there was a man in Magadan who wanted to fly to Yakutsk. He bought a ticket that of course goes through Moscow with a layover in Moscow. So he flew 8 hours to Moscow and 8 hours back to Yakutsk, but suddenly there was bad weather in Yakutsk, so the airplane had to land in Magadan. So he spent all day flying just to come back to the exact city that he started in. Now, my plan for Sakhalin was two parts. There was a hike on the Kuril Islands, which are small islands in the Japanese Sea. And in order to get onto these islands, or most of them, I need a special paper to get there. And you need to call ahead and send some documents, I think 60 or 90 days before you go to these islands. And I did that. And the whole process, I was calling and making sure that everything was ready to go. And I even called just a few days before I went and they said, yep, everything's ready, come on over. And when I got there, I went into the FSB building in order to get my documents and they said, well, we decided to cancel your documents, so you can't go to the Kuril Islands. And I was already there and I was very upset, a little bit angry, but I couldn't do anything about it, so I had to improvise or find a new way to spend these few days and weeks that I had. So because of this, I decided to go north, but not a lot of tourists go north, and so I was curious to see what exactly I would find. At first, I found a quiet bay, which was a nice tourist spot. Most locals go there. Although it was quiet, I noticed that it was very dirty. There was garbage laying everywhere. People seemed to just throw stuff onto the beach, and no one really cleaned up. It was a bit sad to see. But the nature was beautiful. There were mountains and cliffs and these luscious green grasses growing everywhere. As the tide comes in and out, you could walk around and see, look for different sea life and sea creatures. You could hike around in the grasses, but as I found out, there were lots of ticks, or these little bugs that crawl on you and try to bite you and suck your blood. This was the first time I was hiking near the sea, and it was very strange because normally you always want to look for water. And of course, when you're at the sea, you see water everywhere, but of course you can't drink that water and you can't eat with that water. So it was strange to hear this water all the time as the waves were coming, but still you're looking for other water to drink. After exploring this, we decided to go further north to see what was happening. We hitched a ride, we were hitchhiking, so we hitched a ride and started to go north. There was a truck driver who picked us up, and it was quite a funny experience because he said that we couldn't put our backpacks in the back of the truck because it was full, so we just had to hold them in the cabin of the truck, which was uncomfortable, but we were happy to have a ride. At one point, we stopped in order to take a break, and he waves me over and points at the truck. He opens the back of the truck, and I expected it to be very full, but there was one thing in it, and that one thing was a sheep. The only thing that was in the truck was a sheep. But anyway, we kept going with him, and he recommended us to go to a city called Poronaisk. But I had never heard of this, didn't know anything, but he recommended us to go there because the fish was very cheap and delicious. So we went. And I can say that по-русски was not a city to be proud of. It was very broken down and there was garbage everywhere. I definitely was feeling uncomfortable in this area. But the fish was good and very cheap, so I can't complain too much. People were very confused to see tourists there because most of all tourism in Sakhalin happens in the south. So they were very confused on why these tourists had come to the north. But the people were still quite kind. I've noticed in many places in the world, people are always very kind. Doesn't matter where or how they live, but they're always very kind, especially to people who come. After this experience, we headed back south. And so we had another plan. Our second part of this trip was to explore the actual tourist parts of the island and check these beautiful parts out. And so we were going to go on a very relaxed trek and explore these things along the beaches. And as we went, it was quite nice. It was very easy to talk with the other people that were with us in the group, talk with some of the local people who were there along the beach that were fishing or catching different types of sea creatures. And it was very different than our experience in Yakutia, where you had to think about every step and every bit of the way. Sakhalin, of course, in history is quite an interesting place because there were the native people who lived there. It was at one point Japanese. It was at one point an island where Russia sent its prisoners. And there's even a book by the famous Russian author, Chekhov, that talks about his trip to Sakhalin. I, of course, I'm not going to tell you too much about the history because there's other people who can do it much better. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert in history, so I would recommend checking it out. It's quite interesting. We saw this lighthouse that I believe used to be Japanese, but then became Russian during the Second World War. But it was quite beautiful, run down and broken, but quite beautiful to be there, even though you were surrounded by seagulls. As we walked along the beaches, it was quite beautiful. The sand was black, similar to what I saw in Kamchatka. And I swear that these fish, these big salmon, were trying to get caught. They didn't want to be free for some reason. They would quite literally throw themselves onto the beach or out of the river, and you could just pick up the fish and suddenly you have dinner. So I think it's good to emphasize that when hiking or trekking in places in nature, it's interesting to see the differences. You can see the very difficult and demanding, challenging hikes like I did in Yakutia, or you can take a much more relaxing variant where you're singing with people along a fire or making delicious food, swimming in the ocean, and taking your time to enjoy the nature as well. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you learned something new. If you learned something new, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll be happy to share some more content with you in the future. As always, have a wonderful day. Toodles.